What is going on out there, lacrosse fans and sports bettors alike? It's Bet On Lacrosse. We're back, and we, as always, are looking to cash some tickets, betting the fastest game on 2 feet, while we're also aiming to make you better bettors each and every week. I'm your host, Dan Alexander. You can find me on Twitter at Newbie Talks, and it's a beautiful time of year. So I couldn't go over all the things going on by myself. So back on the show, joining us, our guy with Bet On Lacrosse, one of the authors of the Bet On Lacrosse report, Brian Andrews, joining us as the NLL is in full swing. We got college lacrosse right around the way, and also PLL. They're trading players. They're getting everything ready to go for their drafts. The offseason in full swing. So it is a beautiful time of year to be a lacrosse fan. So that's why, Brian, I couldn't go over it all myself. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm excited that we have a full slate of college games to look at. And so far in advance too, which means I think we're going to get odds well in advance of the games. I'm just happy to be able to watch some field lacrosse relatively soon. I grew up as a field guy. I'm way more familiar with that. So I'm really excited to just be able to watch that again. And since I have ESPN Plus for the NLL, I'll be able to watch a bunch of the NCAA games just by chance. So that's just having that subscription has paid dividends for me so far.
It's like the hub for lacrosse, and I am here for it. That is absolutely for sure. And honestly, let's be real, Brian, as guys who love talking about the betting side of things, this is Bet On Lacrosse. Not only am I excited for college lacrosse to come back, because I, like you, grew up watching, playing field lacrosse, I'm pretty darn excited to be able to bet on this stuff as well. So on the show today, we're going to be getting you best bets. We're going to be getting you EMOs, our extra money opportunities, all that good stuff. We also have some concepts to get into here as well regarding maybe some trends or things that we're kind of noticing as the NLL season continues, and might even sprinkle in some NCAA plays. Now, those will probably come more with time, but right now, if you, depending on which state you're in, if you're a DraftKings bettor, you have 8 different games posted for men's lacrosse games that are coming up this coming weekend. You got a Bellarmine and Mercer game this weekend, as well as February 4th, February 5th games, and they also have future odds. And I don't know. I've talked about this before, Brian, that I'm not really like a big time futures bettor, but in Division I lacrosse, where especially when you're talking about like the top 10 teams, you never know who's really live. I mean, there's some nice plus prices on Georgetown. Yale didn't play last year. And so, they're probably looking forward to getting back out there on the field. So I don't know, anything that just really jumped off the page at you when you were just scrolling through, or are you just like me, so excited that we got NCAA plays that we could potentially be playing?
I'm the type of bettor that futures doesn't really excite me too much.
Agreed.
I just think that like too much can happen in a season. Even though you can get good prices or anything, the odds I think are actually worse than what the books give you to place a futures bet. So I just don't find them worth it at the end of the day. But I do agree for NCAA lacrosse. Like if you're within the top 10 to top 15 and you see a good price, like if you want, I guess, but nothing really ever jumps out at me in any league for that matter, not just NCAA lacrosse. It's just not something, it's just not a reliable thing for me.
Well, I think they're fun more than anything. You have a future, and then when it hits, you get to tell everybody, look, I told you at the beginning of the season they were going to hit. But I completely agree with you for the way that I bet and the way that I try and manage my risk. And I talked about this when the PLL rolled around, and we were talking about the PLL futures as well. It's just tough for me to say, here you go, Mr. Bookie, hold on to my money for a whole entire season. And that's $20 that if it's a team that I like betting, why not play them on the money line against a team maybe they're an underdog against, or use them on the spread. I would much rather use that money and continue garnering my investment than just saying, oh, it'll be really cool, and I can tell everybody I bet a 16-1, long odds,
Yeah, especially for the PLL, it's a good example because you might play the field a little bit and go for like maybe who you expect to be like the 4th rank, and maybe they do an underdog run in the playoffs, and then the chaos come in and ruin everything for everybody.
That's true.
So, like, I don't know. You kind of have to try to be like super big brain to figure out who you want to put money down on. And I just don't think it's worth the time to make an informed decision outside of fandom.
There were some things that looked bettable to me on first glance, like right away, I saw when Denver was playing Utah, Denver was plus money if you lay 4.5 goals with them. But at the same time, that's a Utah lacrosse program who's surging. I don't know if I want to be laying goals in the first week. So the way that I'm going to attack college lacrosse to start is kind of the similar thing that I preached when we were talking PLL, and that's a wait and see approach. Now, I'll be honest, I'll probably put some pizza money on some of these games. And when I say pizza money, I'm talking literally $5, $10 bets, if that, just very small amounts. What I would even suggest, if you don't want to do that, or you don't have the bankroll for that, write down on a piece of paper. I call it paper tracking what your play would have been, see what it is. And guess what? No harm, no foul. You'll kick yourself a little bit. Oh man, I should have bet that. You know what I mean? But it's a lot better than you have 4 plays that you like, you go 0-4 because it's the first week of college lacrosse that, sure, you can look at how it was last year, but there's players who are graduating. There's players who are answering transfer portals. So what I would preach to start for college lacrosse is pick a handful of teams, maybe even pick a conference, like take all the ACC teams, something like that, and just follow along to the lines. Maybe when the opening lines come out, write down what the different lines are, write down, what your leans maybe were being, and do that every single week. You'll start getting a picture of what the market thinks about these teams, and then see where your opinions either differ, where they agree with the market, rather than diving in deep and saying, oh my God, there's college lacrosse, let's bet on it. I just think that the better way would be get some information by week 3, by week 4. That's when you're going to be able to really glean some more information. What's your thoughts on kind of college lacrosse? It's the first time we're ever being able to bet on it. How's your kind of approach as we head into that field season?
I'm a little bit more, I don't want to say confident, maybe more confident in myself.
More bullish.
Yeah. Bullish is a way better way to put it. And not that I have like insider information, but like I got into sports betting because lacrosse started to offer it. I wasn't a sports bettor really before the PLL got involved in it. And I jumped on the bandwagon because I knew the sport. Like I kind of understood how it worked. So it's not like I was trying to learn a new sport and how to bet the sport at the same time. I felt like I just had to learn like how to understand the odds and the spreads and like whatever. So I think watching a sport that I've played my whole life makes it a little easier to put pizza money on games early. I mean, there aren't a lot of games in the first 2 weeks that I want to put even pizza money on anyway, but like if I find something that I think is enticing, like a high total or a spread that I think is ridiculous, like we were talking in the pre-show where there was a game and I don't remember who was playing, but there was like someone was like 9.5 point favorites, which is like a hilarious lacrosse spread, right? And I think similar to the first year of the PLL, for example, I think books are getting really used to lacrosse as a sport now, but college is still very different from the PLL. There's not as much parity. Like there are gaps in talents from teams, and I think that there will be ways to earn some pocket change, have some fun with it.
Hey, let's be real. If we're going to Dock Street like we met in Philly, I'll do pizza bets all day. I will bet you a pizza. You bet me a pizza. And regardless, we're eating some of the best damn pizza you can get in Philadelphia. So, hey, Dock Street Brew, you want to sponsor the show? Reach out to us at Pro Lacrosse Talk. He's Brian Andrews. I'm Dan Alexander. And we're happy to be here with you. Another edition of Bet on Lacrosse. I don't know if we have any official NCAA plays in week 1. Brian and I did. We both looked at some totals. I think we were looking at that under in the Denver and Utah game and maybe the under in Maryland's game as well. I'm a little bit worried about Maryland scoring and, kind of blowing that. I think it was like 25.5 was the total in the Maryland game, correct?
Yeah. And I'm kind of playing like the weather early season.
That's what I'm thinking too, is, you got to get the chemistry. It's cold. So again, those are 2 maybe leans that we can give to you here. Leaning in the under in the Denver game, leaning under in the Maryland game as well. But as we continue, as the season goes on, I think maybe some best bettable games will be creeping in from the NCAA for sure. And speaking of best bets, let's get right into it, man. We just gave you the state of lacrosse. We updated you on where to find lines. And again, drop us a line on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse. Let us know what you're betting on. Love it when we have some of these guys, hopping in, reaching out, saying, like that pick, here's the pick that I like. We love that stuff, guys. Keep it coming, guys and gals. I don't care who's betting on lacrosse. Folks everywhere, let us know who you're playing. As we're talking about DraftKings, that's really the house for these lacrosse lines. I think we're also pretty pumped, Brian, because you and I, where we're at in PA, we're also now able to get some NLL lines. Now, we're still waiting on them a little bit, but baby steps, I guess, is the way we'll look, as DraftKings also is now posting NLL lines. So it's just adding another potential out. We always tell people shop for the best potential line that you can find. And we're kind of seeing there's not as much variance in these markets. It's almost like one person kind of originates the lines. Then you might have some different juice associated to different sides of the bets. But as far as the numbers, they're kind of pretty straight across the board. But we've gone, Brian, from having no lines to 3 different sports books carrying lacrosse. And I just think as a whole, there's some cynics who, oh, you're going to bring betting in, it's only for degenerates, it's this, that, and the other thing. As someone who constantly wants lacrosse to grow, I think you're talking out of 2 sides of your mouth if you're saying, oh, betting's horrible. And in the same breath, you're trying to say, we need more people watching lacrosse, because offering betting and responsibly betting is going to bring in way more eyes than just a good game that's maybe on prime time. Because people who weren't lacrosse fans before, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, they're still going to try and seek out information and bet on some of these games, either recreationally, professionally, because they're lower volume markets that maybe you're able to find a little bit more edges in, rather than betting the NFL that those lines are rock solid. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, and it also helps you find fandom in some cases, because it kind of gives you motivation to root for something, and that's applicable to all 3 leagues. Maybe the NLL doesn't have a team where you're at. The PLL, that's self-explanatory. It's a travel league. It's outside of picking a team based on the roster or their uniforms that you like, or their branding, like whatever, a coach, like there's not much to pick. And in college, especially, like if you went to college, you're associated with that college. You have no reason to root for another college necessarily, outside of like randomly picking fandom. And if betting is a vehicle for that, and it increases the number of eyes on lacrosse, I can't see how that's a net negative. That has to be a net positive.
I'm right there with you, Bri. And if you're kind of maybe just stumbling upon us, maybe you're seeing this shared into your Twitter timeline or whatever, and you're wondering, well, I want to get involved. How can I find out more? Check us out, prolacrossetalk.com. And we have a whole entire landing page where you can see a list of sports books that have odds. And we also have some tips on maybe placing your bets, because you don't want to go in completely blind. And, selfishly, we'll also suggest listen to Bet on Lacrosse every week if you want some more tips and in-depth tips on how to bet on lacrosse. Again, he's Brian Andrews. I'm Dan Alexander. Now, Brian, before we get into our picks, one of the things that I was so excited when, you and I kind of started talking back and forth, and with our guy Parker, you guys crafted this Bet on Lacrosse report for the PLL, and we also have it for the NLL. And I think, wow, a lot of people in sports betting get caught up in, oh, here's the trends. Like, how did that trend work out about Aaron Rodgers in sub 30-degree temperatures against Jimmy G, who never played in 30-degree temperatures? Yeah, that trend worked out awesome, right? Just auto play the trends. But I think they're interesting, and some of them are applicable. So I know there's something that you've kind of been tracking about totals in the NLL that might be worth delving into a little bit more as you're trying to peruse the board this weekend. What have you been seeing there, Brian, that's worth note?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think as a whole, the NLL boards have kind of gotten difficult to find some value, because spreads and totals have kind of been 50-50, but the money lines have been like heavily winning. So the books have been pricing appropriately, where typically you get coin flips for totals, right? But what's important is the line they set the total at, what they think the total score of the game is going to be. And through the first 3 weeks, the books kind of had it nailed, with like a couple exceptions where the difference between like the average number of goals over the weekend and the average total line set was within like a goal or something. But over the course of the past 3 weeks, we've been seeing a difference, and that difference is coming in the total score of the game over the total line. They're getting to be over a goal over the total line on average. And we're starting to see the books kind of react to this. And the lines that we're seeing so far this week, the lowest total is 22.5, whereas prior to that, the lowest total is 20. So it's a whole 2.5 point boost. But I don't think that this is a real thing that's happening in the league. I think that the books are reacting to outliers is the word I'm looking for. They're responding to outliers like the Warriors Mammoth game, 18-15, the Wings Nighthawks, 18-10. Like these games are skewing the league average of the total scores up. And I think the books are reacting to these outliers rather than the whole league. So since we're seeing a whole 2.5 point jump minimum in the league, I think there's going to be a lot of places where you can find some value on some unders for games where teams haven't really demonstrated this offensive proficiency that I think the books are awarding them.
And I'm glad that you bring that up, because when we were doing our little pre-show meeting, I think I flip-flopped about 1,000 different times on a total that I was looking to bet, and that's in the Warriors and Mammoth game. And it kind of ties into what you're laying out there. And the reason why it didn't end up being a best bet for me is because there was an adjustment upwards. The first time that these two teams met, there was like over 30 goals. I think 33 total goals scored between the Warriors and the Mammoth. And the total then, depending on which book you were looking at, it was anywhere from 20 to 21.5, somewhere in that range. And it obviously flew over that. So if you're just formulaically looking at these games, you know, the square way of looking at that is saying, oh, they're giving me 23.5. Well, the first time they played, they scored 33, and, automatically playing that over. So I'm glad that, we have this information, because it took a play that was, maybe it's going to hit. Who knows? Maybe the adjustment wasn't enough. Maybe the 3.5 points move wasn't enough and this game flies over. But without having information like this, you're not able to really purse through your plays and take the ones that are maybe a little less optimal and take them off your betting board. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the best tools that we have as bettors is the sports books. If they're offering a league of betting, they have to put up lines on every single game. We as sports bettors, we don't have to bet every single game just because it's on the board. That's one of our best tools, is using things like the analysis that you do with the Bet On Lacrosse report and taking a play that maybe was something you looked at blindly and said, oh my goodness, this is a slam dunk over, and maybe just reeling back and taking that from being a higher level play to maybe a little bit of a pizza money play to even eventually, like it was for me, taking it off the board. It's important being able to use tools like that to really purse through what's a bet that you think is a slam dunk that maybe doesn't look as cash money as it maybe seemed on the first look.
And when you're betting on things like totals, stuff that so far for the NLL, the books are like over or under is minus like 118, 115, whatever.
Great point.
It's important to try to look at where they're placing the lines and how they're reacting to things, because if we're hedging their bets, so to speak, if they're betting essentially that the total scores of the games are going to go up, and we're like, whoa, you're basing that decision off of like 2 games. And then you look at, the history of some of the offenses, like the Rush and the Rock have been struggling so far this season. Like, do we really think that they're going to, and the Rock, for example, have only hit 1 over. Yep. So like, do we really think that those teams are going to produce enough to hit these new lines that they're producing? So you're not getting better odds, but you're earning, the book is awarding you a chance to get over that 52% hit by taking advantage of these adjustments that they're making.
I'll tell you what, there's people talking, sports betting, there's people talking lacrosse betting, and I haven't heard that take anywhere else. That's Brian Andrews right there. That's what you get here on Bet On Lacrosse. I'll start with my best bet here. I'm looking, and it kind of spits in the face of what we were just talking about, but I think there's value here. Seals Roughnecks. The total is 23.5, and it's actually juiced to the under, kind of following what Brian was laying out there. I'm going to go with the plus 105. This could even be an EMO. I'm all about the plus money. I'm looking at the over 23.5 in the Seals and Roughnecks. Now, let's start with the fact that, yes, the Seals have been one of the most consistent teams with one of the best defenses. They're allowing less than 10 goals per game, but they have Chiliano, they have Ariglieri, both of them currently in COVID protocol. They might play, but it's kind of a moot point because Justin Getty did play pretty damn well when he was called upon. But let's look at the offenses here. If we're looking for goals, we got to talk offense. The Seals averaging over 12 goals per game. And I think that might even tick up a little bit. Going to be playing a Roughnecks team who's averaging 15 goals per game allowed. And while the Roughnecks have struggled a little bit offensively, they've started kind of ticking up. They still average under or just over, 10 goals per game. So I think if there was ever a game for their offense to come alive, it's off some solid rest, and it's facing a team they maybe have some added motivation against to get up on the scoreboard, as they just lost to them 17-12. So at the end of the day, I'm kind of letting the line lead the way, though the trends that Brian picked up on says maybe that's not the way to go. I just think this total is high for a reason. I expect goals between these two teams. So give me the over in the Seals and Roughnecks game at plus 105. A little plus money never hurt nobody. That's my best bet. What do you got for the folks, Brian?
Following my whole spiel about the totals being too high and counter to what you were just describing, I'm going to go with the Nighthawks Rock under 2.5. Not the same juice. It's minus 118, but both teams are 2-5. The Rock particularly are struggling with offensive inconsistency. The Nighthawks not as much, but they're not showing like they're a prime offense or anything like that. Combined, the two teams are 4-6 for the over, but the Rock only contribute one of those overs, and the only over they've hit is a 20.5 line. So I think 22.5 is going to be a little too high for two teams that are going to be fighting for their third win. But I think it's going to be a gritty contest. I don't think it's going to be a shootout.
And I almost forgot, like, I get so excited when we're talking, Brian, that I didn't play our ceremonious. Oh, there we go. It's back. That's our best bet. So if you're an under better, you like going with the unders, Brian lays out a great case for the Nighthawks and Rock under 22.5. And if you like a little plus money, you like being a gambler, why don't you go over the 23.5 and buck the trends. Seals Roughnecks over 23.5 is my play for my best bet, which brings us to our EMOs. Oh, so funky. All right, since I bat lead off on my EMO, my man, I'll let you go first here because this is a play I really like. I'm letting you go first so I can bet this while you tell the people, Brian, what's your EMO this week in the NLL?
I'm going to use my EMO to double dip. I'm going Nighthawks plus 1.5. On Sports Interaction, you get that for plus 100, but on DraftKings, you can get it for plus 140. My argument for it is very similar to the argument for the under. The Rock's offensive inconsistency over the past 5 games is, I think, going to allow the Nighthawks to, at the very least, stay in the game. It also allows them to win the game, and the bets still hit. So at plus 140, I think it's a great option because the Rock have yet to prove that if they're going to win, they're going to blow the Nighthawks out. I just don't think that they've proven that to us yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair look as well. And like you kind of said, maybe the game script playing into it as well. You get plus money and you get the plus goals. I love that look. And shocker alert. There's a 2.5 on the board, and it's going to be my best bet. I know you're all so surprised. Give me Panther City plus 2.5 at plus 105. You already know I love just riding with the 2.5s. I did it all PLL. I made money then, and haven't done me too wrong outside of this Panther City team, interestingly enough, being one of the teams that bit me in the ass, biting the 2.5. But 5 out of 6 games, you're getting 2.5 goals in the NLL, you're covering. Even last week, we had the Riptide, and they won outright as a 2.5 point dog. So I just think that this is a team that is, sure, they're trying to find their footing still a little bit, but anytime you're giving me 2.5, I'm about it. And I think they're a live dog in this game. I think they have plenty of motivation. I think they have a little bit of added motivation coming into this game as well. So not only am I going 2.5 at plus 105, I think it's even worth it sprinkled on the money line. I think Panther City can win this game outright. So you're going to give me plus 290. Why the hell not? But the official best bet, so you can't get mad at me if they do lose outright, Panther City plus 2.5. It's still plus money, plus 105, but ride with them on the money line with me as well at plus 290. So those are our best bets, our EMOs. Before we get you out of here for the week, one of the things that we really wanted to touch upon that I completely forgot, I was so excited to get into our EMOs and our best bets. Bandits taking on the Riptide this weekend. And Brian, it's now the first time that we're seeing the Bandits, who are arguably the most consistent team in the league thus far, and arguably the best team in the league, depending on who you're asking. They are now 2.5-point favorites for the first time this year. Is that indicative of the market catching up to the Bandits now that they're finally laying 2.5 goals?
I think so. I think it's about time. I said the last
Agreed.
time I was on.
I mean, I wasn't complaining, don't get me wrong, but
they're undefeated outright against the spread. They've been 1.5 favorites every time. But interestingly enough, if they had been 2.5 point favorites in all of their games so far, they'd still be 3-1 against the spread.
So I think that number alone tells you that, yeah, they've been laying the 1.5, but if they were laying 2.5, they'd still be the best team in the league, basically. I think that tells you this team is legitimate. If you're holding any of those Bandits futures, you probably got to be feeling pretty good right about now.
Yeah. And for this particular play, like at -110 on DraftKings, it's not an unattractive option, because previously you've been having to you've been getting plus money on a lot of plus or minus 2 plays. So I think even the books think that this is particularly likely.
It's shading it in the direction. I think that's a great point by you, kind of reading the line, saying not only are you laying 2.5, you have to lay a little bit of juice on it as well. That's the book clearly making a stance. This Bandits team is damn good. Now, I will say Riptide's finally starting to find a little bit of their footing. I think it was a great spot for them. So I think we're going to learn a lot this weekend, because getting to play the Wings on the second of a back-to-back, just basically hours after they had just finished a game, they had to play another game against the Riptide. I think that it was definitely setting the Riptide up in an advantageous spot. Like, that was a slam dunk spot for the Riptide. So I think you're going to learn a lot more about the New York Riptide this week than maybe you did last week. And I think maybe a lot of people would just look at the scoreboard, look at the box score and say, oh my God, they beat the Wings on the road. Like, the Riptide is rolling. I think this is really the week where you're going to be able to glean, was that more of a mirage, or is this new look kind of vibe for the Riptide here to stay? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and also give us an idea of what doubleheaders mean in the NLL.
Good point.
Because
great
we've
point.
had a couple of them so far, but not too many. It's not like the PLL where it's every weekend and the teams who had the doubleheader were losing or whatever. It's much different here. We don't have as large of a sample size, so we'll be able to see if they got their first win. Yeah, because they lost against Panther City. First win against a arguably tired Wings team, and only barely. So this will be the test of whether or not the Riptide can keep up with, I agree, the top team in the league right now.
I mean, if somebody has a winning Riptide money line ticket this week, you need to tweet that at us at Bet On Lacrosse. I don't know if I have the intestinal fortitude to place that bet right there. Just to remind you and recap, Brian's EMO this week was the Nighthawks +1.5 at +140 on DraftKings. I'm Ryan with Panther City +2.5 +105, worth a sprinkle on the money line at +290. As well. For our best bets, Brian's going with it under 22.5 when the Nighthawks face off against the Rock. And shocker, I'm taking an over. I'm going over 23.5 at +105. That's the Seals and the Roughnecks. So that's our thoughts on this week's NLL, the upcoming NCAA slate as well. Make sure you follow us. Drop us a line on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse, at Pro Lacrosse Bets, and sign up for the wait list. You can get all the info that we have at our fingertips in the Bet On Lacrosse report. We want to know who you're betting on. We want to know if you agree, disagree, what you think about our plays as well. Make sure you drop us a line, and be sure to like, subscribe, and tune in throughout the season and the NCAA season and into the summer with the PLL as we preview all the lines and we help you bet on lacrosse.